It's all about getting the books and getting around good people who will help you and not hanging out, not wasting time. The last bit of advice at this point in life, it's all about time. When you're young, you have lots of time and no money. And when you're older, you have a little bit of money and not much time. So if one can just focus on time management throughout their life and say no, and say no, and once again say no to anybody stealing your time that you're not going to get a fair return on, then I would walk away from time wasters, as I call it. Time sucks. That is, anything that's going to take your time, so that you can focus on 2 or 3 goals that are most important. And
welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 429.
This is the podcast where everyday millionaires spill the beans on their stacks of green. We're your hosts, Jason Stacy, ready to bring you the unscripted tales of wealth, warts and all, because who needs a script when you're rolling in dough?
Join us as we dive into the net worths and asset allocations of regular folks turned financial titans. It's like Cribs, but with fewer gold-plated toilets and more practical advice.
We promise the only rare edits are to be kid-friendly, so you won't hear any naughty language, just lots of cha-ching and maybe a sprinkle of do-re-mi. So buckle up, tighten those purse strings, and get ready to laugh and learn with Millionaires Unveiled.
Today, we've got a very fun episode, but before we get into it, if you'd like to be on the show, send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. We're always looking for new, great, entertaining guests, and even some returning guests who are willing to give us an update, share their story, and let us learn from everybody. Before we get into today's episode, I've had a few of you reach out about possibly doing another meetup. I was not necessarily planning on doing anything this fall again. However, I've had quite a few of you reach out. So I will probably try to maybe coordinate something with those individually who want to do something and try to accommodate in that manner. So if you're interested, just shoot me an email. We'll try to make something happen. See if we can make a little get together happen in person and or virtually. We'll see. Appreciate those that are interested and willing, and those that attended last year. We had a great time. Today, actually, before we get into today's episode, if you'd like to be on the show, send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. And we're always looking for new, great, entertaining guests willing to share their stories. We've got a few $1 Million Hollahs coming up here soon. But today, on today's episode, we have a returning guest. In fact, he came on with a net worth around $7 million, retired at the time, still retired, back on episode number 120. So a little over about 5.5 years ago. And his net worth now is almost to $14 million. So he's almost doubled his net worth. And quite a remarkable journey. He's had quite the returns in the last decade plus since he's retired, as we discussed. Never made over $100,000, so never had a 6-figure salary. And yeah, it's going to be a great episode. So without any further ado, let's get right into it with Sam. Welcome to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. In this show, we have a returning guest. We have Sam. Sam, tell our little listeners about yourself and kind of what you're up to now.
Okay, and I'll be real brief on the intro. And thank you so much, Jace Madison, for your hard work. Millionaires Unveiled is almost a staple now. It's been around for a while, and I see you're up to over 400 and some podcasts. I think I was around number 120, Jace, a while back. And a little about myself, I'll be 66. So I know many of your listeners are probably half that age, but I started out around the age of 25 with my first job, a salary of just $25K back in 1985. And I have grown that. I retired roughly 31 years later at the age of 56, and that was around 2015. So that's a little of that. I am very active. I have roughly a half a dozen property rentals and investments, and I follow the market, and that's a little about finance. And I enjoy talking to young people and getting them to think about wealth. And the journey has been long and hard, but it's been rewarding. And I love podcasts like yours or resources like yours, because it really does educate the young person and the old person on A, you can do it, and B, you just have to put your nose to the grindstone. So with that, Jace, I'll turn it back to you. Still with
Yeah.
me?
So give our listeners a little high level. What did your career span over the 3+
Uh,
decades?
well, the span was 31 years. That's the time frame, and your question is, what did it consist of, or what kind of work, perhaps, Jace?
Correct.
Okay, I was an engineer, university, bachelor's degree, and anxious to get out. Not a high level cum laude type of guy, just an average guy, and in terms of academics. And I then plunged into the workforce back in the mid 1980s. And the key was for listeners is always working on the side, getting what I call the bread and butter job after the college degree. And I would pursue the college degrees should be ideally academic or as they say, oh, there's a word for it, technical, engineering, medical, something. I forget I use it all the time, but there's
Like
those fields,
STEM?
but not, yes, STEM, thank you, science, technology, engineering, and math, and some would say medical, but not the soft degrees. So that's the key. To get started on the right foot, you want a decent degree to make it more. And then in the job, it's keeping the overhead down, not keeping the debt down if possible. It's harder now for young people. But in my span of my career, I didn't have debt going out to speak of, a lot of debt. College was a lot less expensive. And then with the career, I was excited. I was meeting new people in a bigger city, Pittsburgh, and I got to get around people who were hustling, working hard on the side and into new fields, as well as my what I call bread and butter job, my core job. That's what everything rotates around, and including, if possible, a 401k, or for teachers, your 403b, et cetera. But getting that pension established, if you're in the private sector, anything that gives you the 401k, and those sorts of things, maximizing it. That's the key word, is maximizing. Roughly, I think 25,000 a year is what you're allowed, or more, somewhere in there. And then setting up a personal Roth on the side of roughly 7 or 8,000. I think if you're over 55, it's about 8K, but I think under you're 7K. So there's two vehicles there: the IRAs, the 401k, which I started traditional. Talk about that if you like, instead of Roth, and then the personal IRA, which would be a Roth. But throughout the career, it was engineering work, sitting at a desk, mostly doing environmental reports and studies. Then they shook up the place, and I found myself out in the field doing blue collar work, which was great. It dovetailed with my properties, which I was mostly managing my own properties, still do. And so that blue collar work, which was just in line with my rental real estate, Jace, and that was all, as I say, blue collar, and rolling up your sleeves and getting into it, and so on. I did about 30 years of that, still doing it, but often I hire out now a little more. And I would say on real estate to the listener, always buy property you can see every day. I think I said this on the last interview a few years back, is to have to go long distance and either fly or drive hours to get to properties. I don't like that idea. It may work for some, and I'm just not. I'd rather see my properties frequently if possible. So, but the career wound down, working out in the field and so on, and was looking at early 56. I could take retirement, and that's exactly what I did, because I'll not labor on this. The politics of the job, as everybody has politics in their job, and those can really beat you down and frustrate you while you look at others advancing and you don't get to advance quite like you'd like to. Just hard to do, but some of your listeners are super high achievers, entrepreneurs, etc. So they would just roll their eyes at that. Just they're doing the right thing, being your own person. As they say, Jace Incorporated, Sam Incorporated. You are your own incorporation, and every day you get out of bed, it's you Inc. That's a good one. So, Jace, that's a little bit. I'm listening to you. Would you care for me to elaborate a little more on that, or do you have a question or two?
Yeah, I want to get into kind of the trajectory of your investments and kind of the career path and whatnot. But before we do, what is your net worth today?
Net worth today was 13.7 mil.
Wow. So since you've retired, I guess in the last decade, you have quadrupled your net worth. Is that correct?
Correct. Left at 3 mil, and today I'm at 13. So just take that times 4. 400%, which is a great point you make. A lot of people would say, gee, I thought we drilled down on retirement as we progressed in retirement. I thought we drilled down the retirement. But a lot of people out there would say, no, you grow in retirement. And the secret to that is just staying in investments long term, no day trading, just buy and hold decent American companies and ETFs that are growth oriented and keeping the overhead down. Any person in their own business knows to keep overhead down, not getting overextended. I never played margin in the markets, getting on the trajectory point. I just went long term initially. Back then it was mutual funds, and then those did quite well in the 90s. And then now it's ETFs, and that's great. I like those. And then the rental real estate was more like a bread and butter. There's sometimes when the rentals look better than the market when you go into bad markets. So the trajectory was one of just continuing doing the same thing, not getting fancy, not buying a lot of stuff. I think that's the key to success. I'll make you chuckle, Jace. The difference between a man and boy. Can you answer that, Jace?
I probably have a lot of answers.
The difference between a man and a boy is the size of his toy or toys. So, in other words, stay away from the toys. You don't need the brand new car or the boat or the super big house unless you're ready for it. And the other question on that is it a need or a want, Jace? You get what you need, but the wants you got to put aside starting out. To get serious compounding growth, you put the wants aside and just focus on the needs for your family and the important people around you, the needs, but certainly not the frivolous wants. So that's a side point. But on the trajectory, just focusing on the market along with real estate to supplement it and hustling. As I wrote recently on a Facebook site, there's good stuff out there on Facebook. 8 hours is just breaking even. Anything over 8 hours is for success. So once you get home from work after an 8-hour day, then success starts. So that's food for thought. So if you just leave things go, Jace, as I often say to young people, it's like a snowball at the top of the hill. You push that snowball down and the bottom is retirement. I think you know what happens.
Yeah. So what is the breakup of, let's just round up right now for sake of conversation. What's the breakup of the 14 million?
The breakup, and that would be mostly equities in the stock market or the ETFs, and the breakout or the breakup. I'm all into ETFs that are growth, which means stock equities and no bonds. And then the real estate, I don't even count real estate. And this is a key point. When I started out, I counted real estate as part of my net worth. And most people do. And there's a good argument to count it, but I don't. I just look at liquidity and what is accessible. And the breakout is growth. And if you want me to be specific, like in naming particular symbols and things like that, we can do that. Trying to think, and then there's nothing fancy. The properties are, again, I could put a dollar figure on that. I'll just say a couple mil plus or minus, and I don't count that as part of the 13.7. So with the equities, Jace, it would be largely ETFs in growth and more ETFs in growth and mutual funds in growth. Jace, would you care for me to pick out a couple of favorites on that, or would you like to?
If you want, that's fine. But that's a pretty amazing picture. I mean, you've been, call it a W-2. What was your highest earning year, if you don't mind me asking?
Very good question. Awesome question. And that highest earning year, and that included shift work on overtime or holiday pay. I think I saw 90K. I was well under 100K back in 2015. Just about 10 years ago, I never broke 100K with my employer, if you can imagine that. Nowadays, the young people are all starting at 1.25, 150K out of college. And that's just going back to those stimulus checks, but I'll not go down the politics road. I'm just joking. But they get great salaries now. Of course, they debt, but I never broke 100K. 90K was my best year as I wrapped up. Go ahead, Jace.
So never made 100K. What was your savings rate amongst those years? Do you remember?
I would max out on the 401K, which would equate, I would say, I always tell young people 25, 35% if possible, after the debts are paid, after your family and children and all that. If you can still muster that. And just to the person that isn't married, I would say don't marry until later, and don't start too early with children. But I would just say the savings rate was roughly 25% plus or minus. Again, like that snowball at the top of the hill, once it starts rolling and gathering speed and momentum and mass, you've got a lot of things working for you in that regard. But I'd say shoot for 25% of your take home. Well, the 401k gets it off the top, as you know, and I would max out there. And I think that was equated to 25k a year, which is roughly only 1,000 a month, or 2,000 a month, is what my salary, my W-2 would take. And then everything on the side that I could muster, be it a side job. If I had to find something, I was always looking at ideas and little jobs. So that's the hustler in me, and in the successful man or woman, along with the setbacks. You will see setbacks, and they can be legal, etc. You just try to watch that. We could touch on insurance briefly, and I would say be sure you keep insured well and look at the umbrella policy. Some people go LLC. That's fine if you're sophisticated and you have a big portfolio in real estate. That's essential, but I'm not in that area. So I would, the savings rate was roughly in that 25% range, plus or minus, Jace. But as a young man, every $100 I would get, I would send it by account statement, snail mail, off to T. Rowe Price at that time. I'm not with T. Rowe anymore because their expense rates are a little higher than I care for, but they were the core holding some of their mutual funds. Go ahead, Jace.
So I'm just putting this in the calculator real quick. So
Yeah.
$2,000 a month, 30 years, you basically retired with a net worth of $3 million. So call it an 8% return is what you effectively had while you were
let me
working.
clarify. Good question, good point. I would say when I look back over my numbers, and anybody serious about wealth keeps track of their portfolio, I've often found that I was around 15% a year. So that I just didn't give you good info. That's my bad. But
Okay. No worries. I mean,
yeah, money on the side too. Besides the 2K, I would do more than that. I would perhaps make 3 or maybe 3K, and I was looking at sometimes 20-25% a year over the years. But I just follow the S&P 500. Not to interrupt you, sir, and or the growth funds such as the tech ETFs, which often get 15 to 20% average annual returns over 5, 10, 15 years. So I would bump. I'm often said to others about 15% a year. Go ahead, Jace.
So, yeah, and they've definitely been 15% in the last decade here, likely because you've gone from 3 million to 14 million. So,
correct.
Have you put anything in since you retired, or have you just let it ride?
Good question. Good question. Have I put any? I let it ride because, and I'll try to be brief. You tell me how much time we have if you like. My income sources or income streams now, Jace, would be the retirement, what's called an annuity. It's not the insurance annuity. I would never buy an annuity out on the street, but the annuity or pension, as we would say, from the employer. And then there are the rents. I have a little bit in royalty, which is only about $800 or $900 a month, and that comes from what's called oil and gas drilling property, and that's not much. I think the first year, I'll just digress briefly on 1 or 2 sentences on that. If any of your listeners are around oil and gas, they might get excited by the prospect of getting a letter saying, hey, we want to drill, and we're going to pay you a bonus, and here's what we think we can get for you, etc. Well, the first year was great, Jace, about 70,000 or so. And then after that, it just dives. It took a nosedive. As any listener who knows how that goes on depletion. So now it's roughly just 10 or 12,000 a year. So that's a side stream income. It's a viable income stream, roughly 1,000 a month. Then there's as I mentioned, the pension, roughly 2. Then your insurance is taken out of some of that, 25, 3K. So it's not big money to anybody, and that's the most important thing. It's not about salary, Jace, or income per year. It's about net worth or savings and net worth. Net worth and income, you would probably agree, or salary are 2 different subjects, right? So those streams are just the royalty, the pension. I'm trying to think if there's something else. I reinvest dividends. That's a key point, Mr. Madison. I don't pull the dividends towards me, but I make enough from the rents and from the pension that everything's sustaining. Also, my significant other does like to help out on a few things here and there that I would pay for, but I do pull from my money market a little bit as an income stream. That is where the dividend monies go. And I think just to pay my credit card this month, and I never pay interest on credit or anything, I think I had the monies, but I always add 3 or 4 or 5K a month on my checking so that I can have enough local funds to cover bills, be it utilities or be it this or that. So yeah, the streams are just dividends and royalties and your W-2, your 401k. That covers about everything, Jace. Go ahead.
Have you started taking Social Security yet?
No, good question. I'm 66, and the rule of thumb, as many know, is wait till you're 70. I don't need it. And here's the key. We didn't talk taxes yet. I spend more time focused on tax minimizing or minimizing taxes than I do on growth, because at 66, it's not about growth. It's about the minimizing taxes and so on. A living trust is where I'm trying to work at that. There's a couple other things, but Social Security, it would be a taxable income, and you have to watch the politics to your listeners. The current administration, now they're kind of favorable. I like the fact that we have 100% bonus depreciation on many things. Business owners would know what I'm talking about, or their accountants would. And on that, Jace, I'll just give a quick tip. You want a tax man who's looking forward. You don't want a CPA who's looking at last year's expenses. Rather, you want an accountant or a tax planner, and there is a certification for that, I suppose, who can look at your work and help you with the future and minimizing taxes. So the things like Social Security, that would be a tax, particularly with IRMA out there, and the Medicare starts at 65 automatically, and you have to look at your IRMA. So I'm caught in that. I try to keep my wages, my AGI, adjusted gross, such that I'm not getting in a higher one. But I think next year I'll probably kick up to a higher level, regrettably, but that's the way it goes. So no Medicare, that is no Social Security until 70, because I don't need the money. And any of your listeners who are all quality people and who are serious about their wealth, they probably won't need Social Security. It's the people who don't focus on wealth throughout their career that need Social Security at 62. So answered your question, Jace. Not for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm just curious because you're probably in the boat where pretty soon, in a few years here, you're looking at kind of what that RMD situation may look like. And I'm just curious.
You hit the nail on the head. Let me touch on that briefly, Mr. Perfect. I am RMD immune. I want to hear your response to that, Jace.
I'm not surprised, but go ahead and tell our listeners how you got to that point.
And that's a great point. This is probably the most key point in the whole interview, Jace, and that is to get those trads converted over to Roth. And therefore, the sweet spot, as those who follow the subject would know, is you want to get that done in your 60s. The conversions to Roth, or as they say, Roth conversions, and that can take a series of years, 4 to 5 years, to stay reasonable without getting crushed doing it one time. This is all to avoid RMDs later, should the politics hold for that at 75. Who knows what politics will look like for those people, for us who are at that age. But require minimum distributions. They're a boogeyman out there. And my focus, Jace, was I wanted to avoid that with my IRA funds. And here's a key point of that number we touched on, roughly 13.7. I would say 3/4 of that is taxable, and 1/4 of that, or roughly 5 mil, is IRAs. So much of the conversion work I've done over the years has made that into Roths.
How much were you doing roughly per year? Did you start in your 60s, or you start right after you retired when you didn't have any more essentially W-2 income?
I would look at roughly 200 or 300K in Roths a year. Now those, of course, have grown somewhere in that range. I had again 3 mil and so on, And much of that was traditional, and some Roth. Then as the funds have grown over 10 years, et cetera, and we've just had a great market, I would also do a lot of self-study. Nobody guided me on this, and the key is that, and work on the conversions and pick amounts that would be reasonable, and that's the key word, is what's reasonable per year, and take several years to make it such that it's now in Roth, under the Roth umbrella, if that answers your question in general.
Yeah. And when you say you're effectively self-taught,
Yeah.
I mean, how did that even come on your radar? And did it play into the age that you retired at all?
Oh, Jace, you're the best. I can't wait for you to come to Pittsburgh so we can just sit down and have a drink, or something like a. And I don't even care for alcohol hardly. Those days are long gone, and so on. But holidays and all, that's the key, is just watch your habits. But your question is, when did it all? It started in the 1970s. I remember my mother, I can wax sentimental, writing out the bills on the kitchen table and looking at the CDs, which were yielding under Jimmy Carter, 13 or 14%. She's saying, yeah, we go to the bank and we love the CDs. They're great. And so that got my interest. But a quick story, brief. When I was 5 years old, I was hustling strawberries out of a wagon cart in West Virginia. And I would sell those for a quarter a piece because I loved selling at that time. And I'm not a salesperson per se, although one could argue and agree that you wake up in the morning, you're selling, and you go to bed at night and you're selling. We sell all day, be it to ourselves or to others. But I got a mindset, and the key word's mindset. And we got to touch on the books, Jace, if the opportunity comes, on what books your readers or your listeners need in their library. And I just started reading, particularly when I got out of college, and I started developing a mindset of finance, and finally on my own I can make my own salary. So it all started in my late teens, or even when I was younger, to I think I was selling fishermen like night crawlers. We would put those in the classifieds and sell night crawlers, worms, etc. Like that, back when I was 10 years old. So you're always got that motivation, but you got to be around the right people. You got to be nurturing and building good foundation and friendships, ideally, or be with nobody at all. The positive energy is much more key to success than being around people with negative energy. And that's, I mean that respectively. You want to be around people, because sometimes my girlfriend drags me down. I think, Jesus, I need some positive energy here, honey. And she doesn't get it. But she does get me, because she knows I like to work, and I've given her a lot to be grateful for financially, etc. So that part she likes, but she does. Some people don't get it. So the mindset comes early or it comes late, whenever. You just got to, even if you're a latecomer to the game, you just got to start by putting away $100, putting away $1,000, letting it compound in a safe American ETF, etc., that's growth oriented, no matter the age. As you know, retirees are the one minus your age theory is dinosaur. Ideally, you're 80-20. I don't even go with bonds, but I like equities. You want some cash and just watch the market, but just don't overextend yourself and have debt that doesn't allow you to enjoy yourself. So hopefully, Jace, I've given you that mindset. Back when Mom was showing me a little bit about finances, and then always hustling on the side from the day you're out of the womb to the day you die, I suppose, or just keeping focused on wealth. And I wish I could be as successful as those guys who have their own companies, but I don't have the headaches of having the own business. It is the key to success, Jace, having your own business and having a good accountants around you and a good army of people, legal, etc. But I like to think that I avoided a lot of headaches by getting into too many things. Just be good at what you do and invest and be frugal and so on. Jace, I probably digressed there, but hopefully when was throughout my life, watching the parents, and so many people only come from single family homes, but that's unfortunate. I had wonderful parents, middle class at best. I think Mom said your dad never made over 25 grand in his lifetime. He died in 2001. So, an aunt of mine in Washington, D.C. once said, there'll never be a millionaire in our family. And you just remember a lot of things. That's what I like about the upbringing, and the importance of a good upbringing is you remember things that were said by your parents and peers and those you looked up to. Go ahead, Jace.
Were you ever married?
A good question. Short answer, no. I'm with a gal for 10 years now. Actually, is it 10? So going on around 15, I think. And we're together. We're under one roof. We've been under one roof for roughly 8 years. And do I want to get married? Jace, with all due respect, marriage is wonderful, and you should do it. You marry if you're going to have children. And in the Bible, you would read where Paul would say, if your passion is great, marry. But if not, do work for God. So I was never married, came close, or if we might do it before for business reasons, possibly. Because it would help
common
her.
law married by now, right? Y'all
Well,
been
and
together
not
for
in
a
my
long
state.
time.
Good question, Mr. Madison. Not in my state.
All right, fair.
Correct. But if she retires, most people lose their employment. My sister in Buffalo, most people lose their insurance, I should say. She took SS at 62. They didn't have a lot. She didn't have a mindset I did, never did. Totally different woman type of person. And yet I have one sister. No. And yet I, as a teacher, she had to lose her insurance, and then she went out on the market and did get adequate insurance. So it's good for her. I think, it's fairly expensive, the premiums and such, but yeah, my better half, if there's a point where that becomes a good thing to put her under my insurance as family, then by all means I'll do that. But that hasn't came about just yet, and I'm not really anxious to speed that up, so to speak. But I do want her to wrap up on that, I want her to retire as soon as she can because her health isn't great. COPD and things like that. She never smoked, but she had breast cancer, and that took the radiation, took it right out of her. I'm sure some of your listeners can appreciate this. She can't do a flight of stairs without being winded, Jace, if you can imagine. And it's just, she keeps pushing. She's in her late 50s, and she's wonderful. She's got a lot of energy, but one flight of stairs and she's toast for the day, sort of. She gets her wind back, and it's hard for her. She just toured Maine with her girlfriends. They drove, and she knew that she would be having a difficult time with walking on hills. And we're talking about Italy. I'd like to go back there again. I've been overseas once, and I know the walking is incredible, which I tell my friends, I travel to Italy and Europe every day, Jace, and your question is, what are you talking about, right?
Yeah, it is. What do you mean?
What do I mean? I like to kid around, Jace. I get on YouTube, and I just put Italy up and France and all these countries, and an 85-inch TV wasn't enough, Jace, so I got a 98-inch TV for a nice cost at BJ's.
Holy cow.
Make you laugh? And that just fills up the living room. So you can sit there on the sofa looking at Italy, and from drones. You didn't have drones. They weren't that popular last time you and I talked, and now drones are, and they just take you over the castles and all over the place, Jace. It's wonderful to see the Europe from these perspectives on YouTube.
Sounds like my dad.
It really is. I just tell everybody I travel all over, and certainly there's a lot of benefits to just with a super wide screen. Anyway,
Yeah.
I digressed a little bit, but was I ever married? Not yet. It's certainly out there if she'll have me. Go ahead, Jace.
Have you increased lifestyle at all or made a purchase or anything as your wealth has grown that you were
Very
like,
good. That's a great question. And when interest rates were low, which was just roughly 4 or 5 years ago, I was able to acquire a nice property where we live at 3.2%. The other property where I thought it was my forever home, but then something better came along. And that's the key word for them to write down, your listeners, until something better comes along. I live by that mantra. We thought we had a great home at 2.8%. It was wonderful. HOA, cul-de-sac, happy. But then something better came along. And this house was just under $1 million, roughly 4 or 5 years ago. And and it's a lot has to do with serendipity and the man or woman who forces their circumstances. So many of us sit back and let the world pass us by, but if you get out there and make your circumstances, then you'll succeed. So the seller said he needed to sell, and I didn't know this. We just caught it on multi-list, and we kind of liked it, so we looked at it, and he was anxious to sell his building. So he made a deal right there, and the house was about to be put on a Pittsburgh Today show for the holidays. And I said, well, I better tie this up now, and signed on it with the realtor. And we have this beautiful home, and it's all circumstances. So what kind of splurges? That's one. And I've got a reasonable mortgage right now. Mortgages do take a chunk. I've got two mortgages. And here's a key question or a key comment, Jace. And you would say, well, if you were retired, how did you take out a mortgage? And they looked at, and this is useful to all your listeners who are working on wealth, they looked at the net worth, and they said, well, you're fine. We'll go ahead with you. We can take the risk because the net worth was high enough, and liquidity was high enough, not tied up in anything. It was just liquid assets. So that, and then a few other things, mostly just work. I still work a lot.
So, man, what a journey and an adventure that you've been on financially and throughout your career. I want to go back to kind of that retirement inflection point and just what led, mid 50s, net worth around 3 million to essentially call it quits at that point.
In a nutshell, the politics at the job, and 30 years at the job, and I thought that, I was eligible. That what led to it was, I was eligible to retire. And I had a core 401k. The reason I held on to that job, the first 10 years were great. And the second 10 years, I hit the ceiling, so to speak. I could see that I wouldn't advance much further. And the final 10 years were kind of rough, politically. And by that, I mean personnel, etc., and so on. Now, that's vague at most to your listeners and to you, but some people probably can appreciate where I'm coming from. But I was retired at 55, so the last 10 years, 45 to 55, I was just kind of tired of the politics, so to speak. And so became eligible. That's called the earliest you could be eligible was around 56 there, and I took it thinking at 3 mil. I was pretty good. And most importantly, what led to that inflection point of retiring is I did the dry runs. By that, I mean, I did the trial balloons. I did the runs that said you can retire. Now that's, and here's the key to the secret of retirement is you got to know your monthly income and your monthly expenses. And if your monthly income is positive, then maybe go for it. And you want a bad scenario, a middle of the road scenario, and a good ideal scenario. What's that mean? That means that you want to look at expenses unexpectedly doubling or tripling, or just where you are presently with your expenses on a monthly basis. And finally, what's a good scenario where you might be getting 5 or 6K on the side per month, on top of your income from your pension, etc. And so say you're making 10K a month and your outgo is roughly 5K a month. Well, you're positive, you're good, and you're ready to retire. And I wanted to retire. Many people should love their jobs, but many don't, and they look forward to something new. So I knew that I had plenty of work to do on the properties to keep up with. It's a good side hobby, a side gig. I could afford the unexpected things, appliances, new roofs, etc. at the time, but also knew that investments, and you take the risk, you roll the dice. Nothing is for certain, but you'll never get anywhere unless you're taking risk. So I said, well, okay, I'm ready for this. 55, financially, I'm good because I looked at it monthly and I can continue on with my investing. And then the market was that snowball I mentioned, or that steamroller that just kept pushing down the hill, building. And it's a very powerful force, compounding interest. As I tell all young people, the first 20 years, this is key, Jace. The first 20 years was linear growth, just plodding along. And then after 20, everything started shooting upward like an exponential growth, or as some would say, like a hyperbolic growth on a chart. That's where it just shoots upward, almost not vertical, but not far from it, if that makes sense to you, Jace. So that's the inflection point. Was it what caused me to retire? I had the funds. I'd worked hard. I did a lot of dry runs, maybe 15 scenarios where I'd look at, okay, I'm done. What's my situation look financially, all the variables, and my income on a monthly basis, my outgo, and that's that. So you could always go back to work should you need to, but if you're positioned correctly with the market and things like that, and your debt is not great, there's a wonderful there's like 10 rules of businessmen out there. One is don't be too conservative with your funding, but don't take risks that just to get over old losses. I'd go into that. I love that little group of business rules for businessmen. You don't see it much out there. I only came across it very seldom. And those books I touched on, allow me to mention those: Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and then The Millionaire Next Door by Stanley, New York Times bestseller. Then his daughter has the next Millionaire Next Door, Sarah Falla, I believe is her name, Falla. But those are the key books that everybody should have in their library, along with others. But those were the two I always give to young people. I buy them by the batches and give them away to young people, I think, who are deserving of it. Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, Sam, appreciate you sharing and kind of giving us an update on where you've been, what you've been up to in the last little bit. I want to ask just a couple. I know we did kind of rapid fire previously, but I want to kind of touch on a couple. The first one I want to ask is, what's a closely held belief that you once had that you recently changed your mind on?
A closely held belief that I once had that I recently changed my mind on. Good question. My belief, I am Christian and I am conservative. That's not something I've changed my mind on. Those are things I've rather entered into more strongly in the last 5 years. I attend every Sunday. I never miss. But I don't have, it would probably be about time. And I don't know if this was ever anything I changed my mind on. I guess to change my mind on is people. You want to build great relationships, but yet you always have to allow for a person to disappoint you. Could be a business associate. Oh, you can never count. You always have to have a plan B. So to change your mind on these are rules in case you're going forward with a business venture or an investment or relationship. What is your plan B and what is your exit plan? Because chances are with people, there's a 50-50 chance that it'll go south, the business idea or the investment. Partnerships aren't something I would get into because you don't know what the other person's going to do years from now. But what have I changed my mind on? I don't have a solid answer. I just know people will never fail to surprise you, be it positively or negatively. And I really want to give you a better answer, but I I like the question so much. I want to find something saleable or something to sink your teeth into. And I know that you can change your mind. I'm always a believer in self-help materials, so I'm always trying to change my thinking, because we spend our lives growing up in a negative bias from parents all the way up, and you have to spend the rest of your life, once you open up your thinking, to becoming more positive and not biased. And this is an attitude, this is in your actions, this is in your approaches, this is in your mind, your state of mind, your moods. So I struggle at times with moods. In the evening, I get more crankier with my sweetheart, and I can't really explain it. I guess that's a good answer on something I can't figure out, is why I get a little crankier. I call it a sundowner syndrome. All right, Mr. Madison, that's the best I got on that one. What's your last one?
All right.
I may.
How did you make your first buck?
Well, going back to that, I'll challenge your memory. You might recall some of those stories I mentioned earlier. Do you recall any of those? I would, if you did, that's amazing. The first buck. You ready? I was selling strawberries out of a wagon when I was 5 or 6 years old.
Okay. Well, yeah. All right.
But seriously,
That's fair.
it was all about working side. I worked with the state highway department later in my college years. But I would work with my dad surveying property. That was some of my early dollars, but it was shoveling snow as a teenager. Oh, I would $50 a day, and when we get school off, and I would go out shoveling snow, and I was exhausted, but I would make some money, and that pleased me. And I, of course, wanted to show it to my mother or my dad and say, hey, I did this today. So there's some answers that are good, correct.
Any last words of advice for somebody who's just starting out on their journey?
Good question. Last words of advice. I've hit a lot of it in this interview with you, Mr. Madison. It's all about getting the books and getting around good people who will help you, and not hanging out, not wasting time. The last bit of advice at this point in life, it's all about time. When you're young, you have lots of time and no money. And when you're older, you have a little bit of money and not much time. So if one can just focus on time management throughout their life and say no, and say no, and once again say no to anybody stealing your time that you're not going to get a fair return on, then I would walk away from time wasters, as I call it. Time sucks. That is, anything that's going to take your time, so that you can focus on 2 or 3 goals that are most important. And those goals typically revolve around family, finance, fitness, career, and God. Those are some keys. And to have your goals, write them down every day, review your goals, have a script for worship, and know your values, accomplishment, achievements, your free time. Free time is a value. I cherish free time and time management. So those are things to look at for the young person starting out. But those books I mentioned earlier in the interview, and any books that you suggest or anything else that's just value, it's how you spend your time. And then get your rest and get up early and get started with your day super early before anybody else. It's all in those books and things like that. All right, Mr. Madison, that's my best answer there.
Awesome, Sam, with a net worth of just under 14 million. Thanks for coming on the show today.
I'll talk to you in the future again, I hope, Jace.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.